Hi, this is Michael Williams. Welcome to this video. We're shooting these actually in Michigan, Grand Haven, Michigan. It's not Palm Beach Gardens, that's for sure. As you can see, we're outside. It's a little bit shady, but we're not shady. That's the nice thing about the Gospel Revolution. It's full of very wonderful, honest people. And we're going to give you something in this video that certainly is not shady at all. In fact, it talks about shadows. And we're going to get into this. The subject we're going to be talking about is perfection. It's not one often talked about in church. It just isn't talked about. But we've got the audacity to talk about perfection. And we're going to let the chips fall where they may and see whether or not you measure up or not. Do you think you do? You think maybe somebody on planet Earth measures up to perfection? What did Jesus have to say about perfection? Did Paul teach on that subject? So we're going to look at this and let this speak for itself. You know, you can't talk about perfection in any biblical sense unless you talk about Matthew chapter 5. And you'll see why as this video and the subsequent videos that follow, you'll see why this chapter on the subject of perfection is absolutely paramount to understanding what the Bible really says about perfection and what God expects when it comes to perfection. So let's start here. And it's some very familiar verses, and it's in Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. Jesus said, "Think not that I'm come to destroy the law or the prophets." Many times when this verse is quoted, the term "or the prophets" is left out. People like to just emphasize that Jesus said he didn't come to destroy the law. And in fact, if you've ever heard this verse, I would almost bet that that's the only part of this verse you've heard, is that Jesus said he didn't come to destroy the law. Anytime you hear somebody say we're free from God's law, this is going to be their go-to verse. But Jesus didn't say, I not only didn't come to destroy, and the word here actually in its root form means to fragment. He didn't come to divide it up. He didn't come to break a piece off here or a piece off there. You'll see in the entire context of this chapter that Jesus did not fragment the law. Now we do. You got to admit we do. We pick and choose what laws we think are important. We pick and choose the ones we ought to obey, and we also pick and choose those we think others ought to obey. But don't you think Jesus should have the major say-so here in this subject of perfection and issues about God's law? Jesus made the comment about this, and I think we ought to stick with what Jesus had to say about it. As you've seen here, this is Matthew chapter 5, verse 17, just in case you want to check up on me. That's a good thing to do with any preacher or teacher. You got to check up on us. Jesus said, I didn't come to destroy the law or the prophets. I come not to destroy or to fragment or to divide them up. You'll see why that's very important as we get through this chapter. He said, I came to fulfill, but to fulfill. Not destroy, but fulfill. Now, what does fulfill mean? Fulfill means it's done. It's completed, like a prophecy. What happens when a prophecy is fulfilled? You know, Jesus did equate law and prophecy together here in things he didn't come to destroy. So when he says that he didn't come to destroy the law or the prophets, but to fulfill them, we have to look and see what a fulfilled law is. What is a fulfilled prophecy? I think we would understand it better from the term of a fulfilled prophecy. Once a prophecy is fulfilled, does it have to be done again? I think you get where I'm going here. If a prophecy is fulfilled, that means by virtue of the fact it's fulfilled, it's done. It doesn't have to be done over again. Now, equate that to God's law. If God's law is fulfilled, could it mean that it's done? It doesn't have to be done over and over again. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled. Now Jesus here has linked prophecy and law in a way that it cannot be separated. Jesus said everything would be fulfilled. If any law was changed, that meant all prophecy is fulfilled. This is really dynamic. Now let me tell you what this does. It flies straight in the face of everything you've heard in Christian doctrine that talks about unfulfilled prophecies and God's law still being in effect. Wow, Mike, you're actually challenging that? You're challenging whether or not all prophecy has been fulfilled? You're challenging whether or not God's law has been completely fulfilled? And even, as Paul said in his writings, done away with in 1 Corinthians. Done away with. Now, as we go into this, he says, wherefore, therefore, shall any one of these least commandments, if you break even one of these commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of God. Now, Jesus made it very clear. You can't fragment the law. If you're going to teach the law, you must teach it all. Now, wouldn't it be nice if Jesus had given us a good example of what it is to teach the whole law? What would it be like to be a great teacher of God's law? Well, how many of you think that Jesus would have been the great teacher of God's law? I think that's a good idea too. Well, let's see what Jesus taught about the law. It's very impressive. It's not what the Baptists say about God's law. It's not what the Presbyterians say about God's law. It's not what the Jehovah's Witnesses say about God's law. It's not what the Mormons say about God's law. It has nothing to do with what Islam says about God's law or any other religion on the face of the earth. You'll see why no religion measures up to teaching God's law. He said, for I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, you shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. Now, you've got to understand Jesus' perspective on this. You see, during this time, there was nobody considered to be more righteous, more holy than the scribes and the Pharisees. That's what made them scribes and Pharisees. That's what they had to qualify for, was righteousness pertaining to God's law. So now Jesus is ready to address not Methodists, Baptists, Presbyterians, Pentecostals. Jesus is about to address the Pharisees and the scribes who have their job based on their righteousness through God's law. Do you think you could keep a job based on righteousness through God's law? Well, I think if one of us have to measure up to it, how many of you think we all have to measure up to it? Now Jesus begins or continues this teaching as he goes into now he's going to teach on the law. For ye have heard that it was said by them of old time. Now, when Jesus says them of old time, he's talking about the prophets, the very people he's already addressed here in this chapter 5 of Matthew. You've heard it said of them of old time, or in the old covenant, thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of judgment. You know, that's one of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not kill. Surely we preach that, but do we? Now, I think Jesus is the only one who has the right to add definition to what does it mean, thou shalt not kill. What does that mean? Does the court have a right to put definition to that? Well, we do in a legal society. we've decided what thou shalt not kill means, but you've got to realize that what Jesus said thou shalt not kill means is drastically different than what any society, any government on the face of planet Earth even pretends to say about this subject. Look what Jesus said about thou shalt not kill. Are you ready? Jesus said, but I say unto you. Oh, these but I say unto yous are almost dangerous. In fact, they are deadly. They are deadly. That whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of judgment. You see, the judgment that we ascribe to those who kill, Jesus says, if you even get angry and your cause is incorrect. Now, I know you've gotten angry before, and I know that you felt your anger was justified. How many of you have ever gotten angry and found out it was unjustified? Jesus said, if you even get angry without a cause, you're in danger of the same judgment that a murderer gets. Oh, surely Jesus isn't teaching. Jesus is teaching metaphorically here. You know, it's amazing how we reach into Jesus' teachings and we pull out what we want because we don't understand it. Let's just accept it for what it says. Jesus said anger is equivalent to murder based on God's law. You say, well, I never read that in the book of Moses, that anger was the equivalent to murder. But you see, it's the intent of the law. What is the intent of the law? The law's intent was to govern every part of the human being. And guess what part of the human being the law cannot govern? It cannot govern your heart. It cannot make you think a certain way. Have you ever tried to think a certain way? You know, there's 1,001 teachings and teachers who are out there teaching, oh, the battle is in the mind. We battle in the mind. You got to pull down strongholds. You got to fight your thoughts. Let me tell you something. I remember engaging in a battle with my thoughts, and guess who lost? Now, you say, well, just because you lost doesn't mean everybody loses. Could it be, I'm just telling the truth? You see, it's dangerous in religion and in religious circles to admit that you have thoughts that go through your head that would be deemed as ungodly. You might say, Mike, is that what you're saying? You have ungodly thoughts? Yeah, I do. But you know what? I get to select how I react to my thoughts. I get to select. I don't have to obey those thoughts. That's not a fight or a battle with my thoughts. It's knowing that I'm a human and I'm going to have those thoughts. But you see, if you're going to live by the law, be honest. Be honest about the law. Be honest with it and measure ourselves by Jesus' teaching. You know, there's one principle about God's law, speaking of perfection. Do you know the only way that you were allowed in the Old Covenant to use God's law is to judge yourself? And that it is taught by the law that if you use the law to judge somebody else, you have broken every law in the book. So the one thing you can't do with God's law is to deem someone else to be right or unrighteous before God based on God's law. If you do, you've already broken every single law in the book. Jesus continued in this line of teaching about God's law. Do you think anybody else is a better authority on God's law than the Son of God? Jesus continued to say, and whosoever shall say to his brother, Raca, shall be in danger of counsel, but whosoever shall say, thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. Wow. Just calling someone a fool, Jesus says, is in danger of judgment and punishment. Therefore, if thou bring thy gift to the altar, and that you remember that thy brother hath aught against thee, wait. I thought it was if I had aught against somebody that I had to go reconcile that. No, keep your gifts. Your gift doesn't count if somebody has aught against you. Let me read that again. Are we sure that's what that said? He said, leave thy gift before the altar and go thy way, and first be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift. Wow. If your brother hath aught against thee, it really does say that. It's if your brother has aught against you. You know, many people think that you got to go clear stuff up if you've got aught against somebody else. This is talking about if somebody's got aught against you. Now, I don't know if you know what aught means. That means if somebody's mad at you, your gifts are no good. Your service is no good. You just drop your gift, take it back. Jesus said, now that Jesus is teaching the law. What do you do with a gift offered according to the law? If anybody has anything against you, leave your gift before the altar and go thy way. First be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift. Look what else he says. Agree with thine adversary quickly. Agree with your adversaries quickly. Wow. How many of you see we're all falling short of the law very quickly? We're going to take this up again on our next video. You'll be able to find it right next to this one. So click on it when you've got time. Listen to this one again also, because there may be some things that you wonder if it really says that. Get your own Bible and read through it. It really, really says that.